Well, hello. How's everyone? Well. Let's just wait for a minute or two more before we actually start. How's 2025 for everyone? Now that we are in November and there's less than 2 months towards 2026. Yeah. Okay, now it's already 8 p.m. because I don't want this live stream to drag on and on and on. So we will just start with the presentation. I'm still not sure how to configure moving the slides if I were to screen share, so bear with me as I figure this out. So, where should I start? In summary, the good thing is we have only less than 2 months for 2025, but the not so good news is also that we've still got 2026 to go through. Why do I say that? This is because 2025 is a preview into 2026 and also into 2027. So if you actually observe 2025, what has already happened, which is a lot, things are just going to kick up a notch as we move forward into 2026, into 2027. And that's because this year we actually have the preview of the minor grand trine involving Saturn and the 3 outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They are forming this triangle in the sky that's called minor grand trine, which is a trine between Pluto and Uranus. And then they're all sextiling that Saturn and Neptune as the apex, or the minor grand trine apex, as we call it formally. So if we actually look at what's actually going on in 2025, it's actually pretty telling, because if you notice 2025, like it seems like timeline have jumped, and everything seems to be faster. And also 2025 is the first year that we have transit Pluto going out of bound in the sign of Aquarius. And transit Pluto will proceed to go out of bound periodically for the next 9 years to come. So this phenomena will be until 2035. And when next decade starts, I'm talking about 2030 to 2035, transit Uranus, which rules over the sign of Aquarius where transit Pluto is sitting in, and will be going still out of bound for those 5 years, 2030 to 2035, will also accompany Pluto in going out of bound. So if you think now things have accelerated fast enough, then you have not seen anything yet, because 2030 to 2035 will be like even faster. We'll be going through multiple timeline jumps for that matter. And things will become seemingly in the world, in the mundane, become crazier as a result. And but having said that, it's not all bad, because we all need a big cosmic push that manifests in our world in order to wake up humanity at an accelerated pace. So it's not all bad, but it may feel as though that things are just kind of breaking down, or so it seems, but it's actually trying to rearrange the whole dynamic of things on a global level so that we can eventually get to welcome the golden age. Or at least that's how I see it. There's always a pot at the other side of the rainbow that we may anticipate, but it will not be in the next couple of years because astrologically, things are just in the constant flux of change. I guess that's the best way to put it. So let's just start with this presentation. And in 2026, we have not one but two active transit Venus star points that's active. One of them is in Capricorn, which will start at the end of the first week of January 2026. And the last of the transit Venus star point in Scorpio at 0 degrees. That's why I put here the last Scorpio, because this is definitely the last. By the time we actually hit 2030, we will welcome the first transit Venus star point in Libra. Just as a note, transit Venus star points are not moving along with the flow of the zodiacal wheel. It's actually moving against the grain of the zodiacal wheel. So when I say a transit Venus star point is phasing in, it's actually phasing in at the tail end degree of that sign. When something is phasing out, it's approaching the 0 degree mark of that zodiacal sign. The transit Venus star points follow the same direction of flow as time progresses, just like eclipses. Okay, so just as how eclipses progress, this is how the transit Venus star points move against the grain of the zodiacal wheel. All right. And so we are looking at the Capricorn and the Scorpio transit Venus star points that will be active in 2026. But this will spill over into 2027. And this is because the transit Venus star points, on average, they last in the shortest period of effect 9.5 months. Because every approximately 9.5 months, that's when transit Sun and transit Venus meet up with each other in the sky to create an energetic zodiacal point that what we call the transit Venus star point, or t.VSP in short. So I've actually shown here, starting of January, we'll have a transit Venus star point in the middle degrees of Capricorn, but this has something nuanced about it because Mars will actually join this transit Venus star point as well. We're going to have a stellium in Capricorn in January. And 9.5 months later, on the first day of Scorpio season, Venus will meet up with the Sun again, but this time Venus will be retrograding. We will have a Venus retrograde in 2026 that will span from the sign of Libra to Scorpio. So when Venus actually moves back optically in the sky from Scorpio into Libra, Venus retrograde will conjunct the Sun, forming this transit Venus star point at 0 degrees 45 minutes of Scorpio. This will be the last one that we will experience in our lifetime. So this is something big in itself. When we actually experience the phasing out and the phasing in of a new transit Venus star point in our lifetime. So let me just kind of lay out what we may anticipate in terms of the general overview, what I do see for 2026. But before we actually get there, let me just kind of lay the really broad background of what I do see on an energetic level for 2026. So this year, 2025, that is 2 plus 2 plus 5, we've got 9. So it's universal year 9. When we enter 2026, 2 plus 2 plus 6 equals 10 reduces to 1. So we will be experiencing numerology year 1. So it's a time of new beginnings. If we talk about numerology, what this may mean, and there may be a lot of innovations that's coming our way, because the number one is like, it's like the seedling that's sprouting from the ground and it's like peeking through the soil. It gives a lot of promises and a lot of new beginnings. And there may be a lot of bold initiatives that's going to be undertaken on a worldwide level. 2026, if I were to utilize Chinese astrology, we are also in the year of the fire horse. So if you think about this year, 2025, is like year 9, year of the snake. We are just kind of trying to finish or tie up the loose ends of things, unfinished business. Next year, there's a lot of like initiative, like go-getter energy, because fire horse and it's universal year 1. And when we talk about fire horse, this really symbolizes like freedom, adventure, and passion. And also, when the Chinese Lunar New Year actually takes place in 2026, we actually have a solar eclipse as well. It coincides with that. And that particular solar eclipse will be close to exactly squaring Uranus in Taurus. The very last few months in which Uranus will be in Taurus. And 2026, it will ingress into Gemini and will not come back to the sign of Taurus. So from a pretty slow sign like Taurus, it actually moves permanently into Gemini, which is very quick. So you can see just from this that things will kind of quicken in terms of timeline. We actually have like a preview of this in 2025 this year, when Uranus did spend a good couple of months in the mutable air sign of Gemini. So if I actually take this numerology year 1 energy in 2026 and combine that with the fire horse according to Chinese astrology, together, like energy, drive, and enthusiasm, is suitable for some kind of bold move, or at least we are like being pushed to actually go there. There will be some exciting changes, but as with changes, some of them can be perceived as, quite jarring as well. While 2026 does offer like immense potential for forward momentum, but it also represents kind of like a challenge, because we may get into some kind of aggression or conflict as well. This is somewhat is spilled over to what the Transit VenusStarPoints in Capricorn for most of 2026 is about. However, I do see that this also emphasizes like the need for courage, self-awareness, and individual leadership to navigate these powerful forces. Now that the predominantly featured minor grand trine that I talked about just minutes earlier will be fully locked in. So the planets will be all in masculine signs. It won't be retrograding into feminine signs like this year. And I will go on and say that late April 2026 onwards, we will really start to feel this. Switching from masculine to feminine energy. Also, when we actually talk about This transit Venus star point in Capricorn, which will be active for most of 2026, the ruler is Saturn, and transit Saturn is also bound up in that minor grand trine with the three outer planets, with that Saturn in transit moving in a sign of Aries. So you can see Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, is numerology year one, and we have like fire horse year in terms of Chinese astrology. There's all this optimism, but also there may be a tendency for us to be reckless and also rashful as well. So just hold on your horses and don't be ready to like just jump in the pond when you have not thought of your plan. Put it that way, because Saturn is in Aries. So before you jump in, you got to have a plan to go along with it. Also, I'll just like to mention here that in 2026 we do have something that's pretty unique, because we will not have one but two planetary parades in the sky in 2026, and both will be around eclipse portals. So it's extra powerful. We've got eclipses, but there's a planetary parade on top of that over that time as well, twice in 2026. So the first one will actually take place on February 28th, 2026. That's actually in between the two eclipses. Next year, in the earlier part of next year. And this will be the first of two planetary parades, whereby we will actually have not one, not two, but 6 planets. Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune will be aligned in the sky. So that's why I actually proceeded to add this photo on the first slide of the presentation, because this actually symbolically or metaphorically symbolize that the eclipse portals will be extra powerful and potent. It's like being on double steroids, put it that way, because of the planetary parade coinciding with eclipses. This first planetary parade, to the naked eye, we will only see 3 of the 6 planets: Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. The fourth one is actually Mercury. That one is a maybe. We will see it, we may not see it, depending where you are in the world. It's only possibly visible to the naked eye. And Uranus, Neptune, which are the outer planets, binoculars and telescopes will need to be used if you want to see them. And the second planetary parade will happen on 12th of August 2026. Again, this planetary parade then will have 6 planets involved: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune this time will be aligned. And with the naked eye, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn will be expected to be visible. Uranus, Neptune, as the outer planets, you will need binoculars or telescopes to actually see them. And Mercury is also a maybe. Okay? This second planetary parade has something extra special, because we will have also a total solar eclipse at 20 degrees of Leo that will happen later in 2026. Every time when there's a total solar eclipse, you know it's total. That means the magnitude, we will definitely feel it. Last but not least, when I think about this Capricorn transit Venus star point and the subsequent last Scorpio transit Venus star point happening in 2026, they actually, just like Transit Venus star points, they work synergistically together. If you think about the ruler of Capricorn is Saturn. If you think about the modern ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. They actually have some correlations going on in 2026 in terms of the ruler interacting with each other. And this is on top of some other nuanced interactions such as Anticia between eclipse points and transit Venus star points that it really brings together like a very interesting power dynamics and also struggles between the military or armed forces and the government itself. So what I'm trying to say is that 2026, we may actually anticipate some kind of, it could be military coup, it could be some kind of breakdown between government and the military department in their aspect. So this is something right off the bat I want to mention here. Because I do see that in 2026, there may be this kind of thing going on. So moving forward, we do have eclipses in 2026 along not one but two axes. And that's because we have the solar eclipses happening along the Leo Aquarius axis. But then the lunar eclipses are still in Virgo Pisces axis. So there's this kind of a switch over kind of effect. And this tells me that this will be like a very hybrid transitional year kind of energy because the eclipses are happening 2026 particularly. The solar one is on one axis and the lunar one is on another axis. So we are still not done with the Virgo Pisces story. They actually started last year. There's still something to unfold. In other words, as we welcome the eclipses along the Leo Aquarius axis. What I want to point out here is that we are right in the middle of what we, or should I say, what I personally call a tetrade series of blood moon eclipses. If you actually look at the 2025 lunar eclipses, they are both total lunar eclipses, or in other words, blood moon eclipses, where the moon totally turns blood red. Coming up in 2026, we will have one total lunar eclipse coming up in early March of 2026. The last one is actually technically termed a partial lunar eclipse, but the degree of eclipse of the moon is pretty substantial. In which more than around approximately 90% of the moon will become blood red. So it's only like that sliver of the moon that remains like the moon's color. Every time when I actually see a tetrade or a near tetrade series of blood moon eclipses, in this case, what we are undergoing now, halfway through, which basically started in late March of 2025, this usually tells me that, at least on a historical basis, because astrology is about correlating what's happening in the past and projecting into the future by looking at phenomena. They usually are an indicator of war, conflict, and historical shifts. I mean, we actually feel it in 2025 with what I mentioned earlier about transit Pluto going out of bound. It's actually still out of bound as we speak until December. This started back in August in Leo season. And then we've got blood moon eclipses that kicked off in late March 2025. So we already can see all this changes happening in front of us. And also, because of 2025's Transit Venus star point being in a sign of Aries, this is ruled by Mars. And the one that is coming in 2026 is happening in Saturn before it actually switches over to Pluto, with the traditional ruler being Mars. I can't help but look at the Mars and Saturn cycle, which is very indicative of what we may kind of anticipate. And that's my thinking pattern into deep diving into the Mars and Saturn cycle, which ties back to the Transit Venus star points that's unfolding in front of our eyes right now, and see what is actually going on. The transit Mars and Saturn conjunction will be meeting at around 7 to 8 degrees of Aries. And this is accompanied by transit Mercury as well. So we actually have got a stellium, a transit stellium of Mercury, Mars, and Saturn around this degree of Aries, in which Mars will have his dignity, Saturn not so much. If we talk about essential dignities of planets, and then Mercury is like, it is Parisian in terms of essential dignity. So Mars basically edged out the three planets in terms of what it can express. And Mars and Saturn conjunction cycles basically last on average around 2 years. So, and this conjunction, Mars and Saturn conjunction, will be happening around 19th or 20th of April 2026. So we may actually feel it slightly earlier when both planets have already entered into Aries. And Mercury needs to be included here because eventually all three planets will come together for this conjunction on 19th to 20th of April of 2026. So you can see there's like it's almost like cardinal energies. When we talk about cardinal energies, like things are definitely happening right off the bat in 2026 when we have that transit Venus star point in Capricorn, which is also a cardinal sign. And then 3 months later, or 3.5 months later, around 19th to 20th of April 2026, we've got Mercury, Mars, and Saturn all meeting up at 7 to 8 degrees of Aries. So, guys, you may want to check like what do you have around the 7 to, I would say like 6 to 9 degrees of the zodiacal wheel. If you have any placements there, it will be expecting this Mercury, Mars, and Saturn triple conjunction from Aries. So you may want to plot that 7 to 8 degrees of Aries and see which house it falls in your chart. What does it actually expect to kind of tell you what's actually coming up for you for the next 2 years, approximately into 2028. April, what you're trying to build, what decisions are you going to take? What are you going to dive into and just do it and become your own master builder to build some kind of structure in that phase of in that sphere of your life? We also have the Aries and Libra axis eclipses that's still unfolding. I just want to put this statement here because people normally just think that, eclipses just last for a few months and that's it in its effect. Particularly when we talk about solar eclipses, their effect can last for 3 years or more after it happened. Because I actually use this technique that progresses eclipses in terms of their influence. And until the next new moon, because solar eclipses are basically new moon on steroids, at least until after the next new moon in that sign and around the same degrees happens, which is around 3 years later, if there's actually a solar eclipse that occurred, it's part of a much longer unfolding story that lasts for 3 years, if not more. I've seen in some cases an eclipse that happens like, I think for a client 5 years ago, that eclipse is responsible for what happened in the last 5 years of her life. Lunar eclipses, depending on whether they are total blood moon eclipses or otherwise, then this may kind of vary because a lunar eclipse is a full moon on steroids. And we probably will feel more in the moment when a lunar eclipse actually happened, because that's when the sun and moon are at their furthest. And I think that's why in the English language, there's this word called lunatic. Why we call it lunatic is because it's lunar. And usually during full moons and lunar eclipses, weird stuff do happen because of the gravitational pull. And you just can observe like how the tides are behaving, and humans are basically 70% water, just saying. Also, I'll just like to mention here that, or should I say reiterate that the minor grand trine involving Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, they will fully come into, all of them, into masculine signs from 25th of April 2026. And I mentioned earlier that transit Mercury, Mars, and Saturn will meet up at 7 to 8 degrees of Aries. So you can see how this like shift of energy, like probably for the first 3 months, there's this kind of slight pause in terms of the pace of things. But then when April comes in, all the outer planets plus Saturn will change sign to masculine signs. And then we've got this triple conjunction happening in Aries. Aries, cardinal sign. And then we've got the apex of this minor grand trine being Saturn and Neptune. They are also in Aries as well. So it's like all this, how do I put it? It's like a big reboot in the pace of stuff. And probably for some of us, it may take us longer to catch on to the pace. But those who are sick of like probably things are going nowhere, or like things are feeling stuck, April may be the crucial month in which you may feel that shift. Just get down and do it. There's this kind of energy to things. And I've also looked at the zodiacal sign placements of both transits, Jupiter and Saturn in 2025 as well. Before I actually go there, let me just mention something that people have been asking me. People are saying that whether Trump will step down and JD Vance will go up. I just want to say that even if JD Vance goes up, this may not be a good thing, because you need to know who is his boss. Technically ex-boss, that's what's written in the news, but Peter Thiel of Palantir Technologies. He deals with software platforms and big data analytics for military and intelligence purposes. He does have his sun in Libra in the middle degrees of that sign, squaring the upcoming transit Venus star point in the middle of Capricorn. So there's this square going on. This tells me that he's going to be thrown into the limelight more because it's his sun, right? Just look out for what kind of deals, which is Libra, agreements, contracts that, or what things that he is going to launch in 2026 that's concerning, and dig deeper, and you will understand what I mean in terms of you need to look at what he's doing to actually see where we are all heading, because there's some projects that's questionable where he's putting his money in. Also, people have asked me whether JD Vance will replace Trump. I've actually written some analysis here, and using that transit Mercury, Mars, and Saturn cycle, and also zodiacal releasing, there's something going on interestingly in JD Vance's chart in terms of him becoming more prominent. Whereas for Trump, there is this kind of struggles in terms of holding on to power, which I can see after analyzing everything. And I analyze JD Vance's chart, Trump's chart, and lump it together with the USA's chart to actually see what is actually going on, whether there could be like a potential change in leadership in the White House. There's actually a window for JD Vance to step up as the POTUS. And this can be due to Trump's health issues that may creep up in 2026. But the window I'm talking about will be in April 2026, when all these things are going on. One thing I do see that if JD Vance actually step up to take over Trump, in this case, will be that whatever that's going on in the USA, like the ICE raids, that may actually come to an end, by the way. But there's some caveat. There's also we need to observe, and that's basically what I was talking about, like Peter Thiel and what he represents and all that. My computer has frozen, so let me have a look at what's going on in the live chat. Okay, my computer's unfrozen, thank God. So let's continue with it. So like I mentioned, I have used transit Jupiter and Saturn in their tropical zodiacal sign to map out this table here. So these are the signs in which transit Saturn will be moving in 2026. And this one will be where Jupiter will be moving in. And combining the influence of both, and also using this Vedic technology to identify what zodiacal sign will be synchronistically activated by transit Saturn and transit Jupiter in their respective signs in the sky, using tropical zodiac, that is, you will see that from 1st of Jan to 13th of Feb, the sign of Pisces will be activated. And then after that, from a mutable sign, Pisces energy, the rest of 2026 is very much cardinal in terms of the feel of things. And by the way, when I look at the signs of Capricorn and Aries, these two signs are very much tied into um, the chart of the UK, with Pisces being like secondary influence. That's why I wrote here, there's something that's coming for the UK starting in April. Because of this influence, and this influence basically drags on for the rest of 2026. And you will see here that we don't have any fixed signs that's in the table that's highlighted. So next year can be it may actually feel pretty unstable, in other words. Because fixed signs, it does give opportunities for stabilization. This is what's missing in 2026 as a whole. Because we have mutable, then it switches to cardinal. There's no fixed signs being highlighted by transit Jupiter and Saturn symbiotically to give us some kind of opportunity for stabilization. So things are kind of, it can almost feel like all up in the air kind of energy. I have actually written here that what can be the potential positive and negative manifestations. And what's really interesting here is that Capricorn is a sign in which Mars is exalted in. Aries is a sign where it's the natural rulership sign of Mars as well. So there's all this Martian energy that will take precedence from Valentine's Day in 2026 for the rest of the year. There's something here that needs to be counterbalanced. And so we have to look at the signs that will counterbalance these two, which are Cancer and Libra, ruled by the Moon and Venus, both feminine planets. So this leads me to think is that there may be a lot of half and puff pertaining to male leaders of the world when after Valentine's Day kicks in next year, and we will have the rise of counterbalancing female voices. I think we've already kind of started to see it this year pertaining to, like, for example, Japan has elected like a female prime minister. That is a first. Although she identifies herself as Margaret Thatcher, which is a whole other thing. But nonetheless, there is this kind of energy that I do see it coming in 2026. 2025 is almost like a preview of things. 2026, we may actually see the rise of even more female voices. And by the way, this may also be because we are stepping into a period where there may be a rise of fascism. And whenever in history that I saw a rise in fascism, usually progressive movements in society that we have reached in recent decades, like women's rights and LGBTIAQ plus rights, those may get compromised or threatened. And so we may actually see this rise of counterbalancing female voices to make a stance, not to regress into where we came from. And this is pretty evident in 2026, I may say. But in terms of negative manifestations, I've actually written here that because Mars and Saturn, like I mentioned earlier, will meet up with transit Mercury to form a stellium in this part of the zodiac in the 3rd week of April 2026, and Mercury rules speech. So it's time to redefine what actually constitutes free speech. There may be laws or legislation which is very Saturnian in nature that may be implemented or pushed through Mars that affects speech, which is Mercury. I do see that there may be instances where certain live streams, certain content may be previously they just let them through and monetize them. Now there's like new regulations that basically demonetize them. This may even lead them to get their channel banned or shadow banned for that matter. So I do see this as a threat to free speech by hurting other people's pocket, because Saturn is also it talks about the storage of a wealth as well. So like you gotta hurt Mars where their pocket is, whatever monies that's entering into their pocket, which can be Saturn in a way, by controlling the content or the information that they're giving out, which is Mercury. So I actually said here that there may be stricter censorship or demonetization policies regarding rage baiting content. This is very Martian in nature. But this can also be pretty Capricornian as well, if I think about it. Because in both signs, like I mentioned before, Mars function very well in these two signs. So let me just go through in terms of the important periods of 2026. And first and foremost, this will be the solar eclipses. Like I mentioned, the first solar eclipse in 2026, it will coincide with the Chinese Lunar New Year. And that one will be very tightly squaring transit Uranus in Taurus with an orb of less than 1.5 degrees apart. And that Uranus is also co-ruling the sign of Aquarius, the sign of where that solar eclipse will be. So it can be potentially chaotic. Not to mention that when this first eclipse will occur, this is around like, I think 17th of February 2026. This will be when the energy has shifted from mutable to cardinal. So we are already having that speeding up in terms of the rate in which things will happen. And then we have a second solar eclipse that will be at 20 Leo. This one is a total solar eclipse, pardon me. This one will be extra potent. The only major aspect to this total lunar eclipse is this trine to Pallas of Venus happening in a sign of Aries. This can be an indicator of some kind of strategic methods in terms of conflict or some kind of confrontation of sorts. On top of that, we still got to finish up the near tetrate of blood moon eclipses in 2025. The effect of this near tetrate of blood moon eclipses that's finishing up technically in 2026, its effect will only fade off until the early parts of 2028, by the way. When there's new moons, when there's full moons replacing this tetrad of blood moon eclipses happening from 2028 onwards. So we will still feel this tetrad of blood moon eclipse effects all the way till the earlier part of 2028, the first half. I just want to mention here that the first solar eclipse squaring Uranus with less than 1.5 degree orb apart, this will be triggering quite a number of countries' charts. First and foremost, because it's a square, I got to look at what is actually triggering. This is triggering the Saturn of North and South Korea, and also NATO's natal Saturn, Israel's natal Mars, Estonia's natal Sun, and Iraq's natal Sun, Mercury, Pluto. Also, North Korea has got their natal Uranus at 0 degrees of a cardinal sign, which is part of the world axis, by the way. The other world axis points are 0 degrees, Aries, Libra, and Capricorn. So when we talk about Uranus, where North Korea's placement is on the world axis at 0 degree Cancer, Uranus does rule things like missiles, nukes, cyber crimes, trafficking crimes. And this will be squared by transit Saturn and Neptune at 0 Aries. This is actually telling me that around the time when Saturn and Neptune ingress back to 0 degrees of Aries, there may be something that's going on. And this is around the time of the first solar eclipse in the middle of February, in terms of what Uranus stands for. I have also read quite a good chunk of like geopolitical things. And there's so much shifts in terms of what's going on in terms of the relationship between North Korea and China. It seems to me that China doesn't want to be that little brother figure to China. And so there may be something that may be stirred up in February of next year around the Chinese Lunar New Year time. Okay, so this is something that I've spotted that's worth mentioning. And this particular eclipse will be happening at the tail end of Aquarius, close to 29 degrees of Aquarius. I got to look at what the Sabian symbol is about. And I've written here that this is talking about a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis. So, to be honest, this can also be like metaphorically a time of rebirth for us over this February annular solar eclipse squaring Uranus. I've actually written here that it's a moment for a collective spiritual and personal evolution. So February, right off the bat, just as we just enter into 2026, we are hit with this kind of portal of needing to evolve in an accelerated pace. That can be a struggle for most, because as we know, a butterfly emerging from the cocoon, like it has to go through so much struggle that the butterfly becomes tired. And it's almost like metaphorically that kind of energy. But on the other side, if you can go through this, you experience this whole new sense of renewal. And this kind of never felt before freedom that may come forth. This is very much kind of prepping us from February all the way to April before the real fun begin. Pardon me. And this is just what I've written earlier pertaining to the Saturn and also the 3 outer planets all moving into masculine signs from this date onwards, right after transit Mercury, Mars, and Saturn, all 3 conjunct at 7 to 8 degrees of Aries. So from this February, mid-February energy, all the way till I would say the 3rd week of April, it's almost like we are accelerating our growth path, evolution, transcending certain limitations that we previously have, often taking breaks here and there to rest because this can be pretty exhausting. And then April, here we go. At the same time, we do have previous eclipses along the Aries and Libra axis still unfolding into 2026. And also, some months ago, on the last day of Virgo season, we also have a solar eclipse very close to the world axis at 0 Libra. It's just 1 degree away. This is still unfolding as well. So there's all these layers of, yes, we are going through this now, but it's like an iceberg. Whatever that's unfolding is like we don't see that submerged in the iceberg that's unfolding as undercurrents or energy. And this adds on to the sense of like urgency of things that we may be feeling. And I've written here that 2026 is just a continuation of 2025 story. Also, I just want to point out here that when we actually experience the 3rd consecutive blood moon eclipse in the beginning of March of 2026, I have basically analyzed charts for the EU, predominantly because the EU does have their moon at 0 degrees of Aries, which is part of the world axis as well. With that point being activated around the February to early March timeline, I am anticipating around the eclipse portal from mid-February to early March that in the EU we may anticipate something along the lines of like blackouts, power cuts over particularly in Western and Southern Europe. And this is on top of like strategic cyber attacks affecting electronic equipments that may be tied to this country or countries that may have funded them. Just saying. Also, I'll just like to talk a little bit more about the second solar eclipse, which is a total one at 20 degrees of Leo. Around mid-August 2026, this 20-degree Leo total solar eclipse will be visible over India, Pakistan. So I anticipate something to go down over there because India and Pakistan also got prominent Leo placements in their independence chart. This is on top of Singapore, the UK, and also Israel. This 20-degree Leo eclipse will be also impacting them. Particularly, I want to bring your attention to India and Pakistan because of this total solar eclipse that will be happening. Um, I am anticipating that the so-called like Islamic NATO with other Middle East countries may expand around or pretty close to this mid-August 2026 timeframe. There will be some things going on pertaining to that. And this basically started in 2025 with the Saudi-Pakistan deal or pact that was signed, that was reached over the September 2025 eclipse portal. So because of this Saudi and Pakistan deal or pact that was signed around that 29-degree Virgo solar eclipse, I am anticipating when this 20-degree Leo, mid-August 2026 total solar eclipse will bring in the expansion of this. This may actually hurt India quite a bit. Also, I would just like to mention here that this total solar eclipse that I've highlighted here is also visible over Greenland, Iceland, Spain, Portugal, so Southern Europe again, and Russia. And the intensity of this total solar eclipse will be felt at its most potent concentration is right over Greece, into Eastern Europe, over Serbia, Romania, Ukraine, Belarus, and lastly over Moscow in Russia. North Korea will also be somewhat affected by this total solar eclipse as well. So North Korea will be impacted by both solar eclipses in 2026, in other words. And this may manifest as a potential plot against the current leader that may also involve an undisclosed health condition. I just want to put it out there, resulting in the possible sudden rise of his sister and a subsequent power grab, related internal conflict within North Korea itself. So what I'm trying to say is that North Korea, there's undercurrents of potentially many things unfolding. So what I'm trying to say is that the current leader of North Korea, he's unwell, in other words. But this will come to light over 2026, over the solar eclipses. And this may be the chance for the sister to step up into power. And this is somewhat, I call it a positive thing. But of course, North Korea is a whole other story. I'm just putting it out there. And there will be all this energy that will be manifesting itself. After the total solar eclipse, I'm actually talking about when the sun enters. Let me see whether I should say this. The lunations happening during Aries season and also Libra season will be very, very important. This is because, first and foremost, the Aries and Libra eclipses that formed an X over the USA will become full moons from solar eclipses 18 months ago that will be happening in 2026. The first one will be happening 1st to 2nd of April, I think that's when there's a full moon happening in the sign of Libra. So there's a Libra full moon, and then Libra season there's an Aries full moon. Yeah. So these two full moons, it will be pivotal, put it that way. So look out for those full moons happening in 2026. So let me just go to the next part. I think I have elaborated enough in terms of what to anticipate. So I've talked, or should I say mentioned earlier regarding the tetrad of blood moon eclipses. And right now, we are actually halfway through it, but technically speaking, or astronomically speaking, the last one is a partial lunar eclipse. It's not a total one. So this won't be fully a blood moon. But however, this last lunar eclipse, nonetheless, the moon will turn blood red like 90% across the surface with respect to what we see on Earth. So I consider this as a near tetrad of blood moon eclipses. So in the past, these are the dates in which a tetrad of blood moon eclipses have taken place. The last time that this officially happened in 2014 to 2015. So we are here in between 2 and 3. The next one will be happening in 2032 to 2033. So I define this as a near tetrad of blood moon eclipses. Okay. So the last time when this happened in 2014, 2015, you can Google what actually happened in the world, be it geopolitically, and you will know that a lot of things basically happened in 2014 to 2015. When we actually talk about a blood moon total lunar eclipse, they are usually considered an omen of significant events or a reflection of major historical occurrences. This is very important to note. If you think about one blood moon as a bad omen of sorts, how about a tetrad, which is 4? Back to back to back. So we are undergoing perhaps a very compressed phase of historical occurrences that's very major. And I have actually dug a little bit deeper by referring to a book that's written by this guy. And this is the book that I've dissected, the title of it. And he has basically done some studies regarding a tetrad of blood moon eclipses and how it ties into historical shifts and occurrences, particularly for the Jewish people. Especially, it's even more so if it lands on their holidays. This basically symbolizes that if the tetrad of blood moon eclipses coincides with Jewish holidays, it is a divine sign signaling significant upcoming events for Israel and the world. And of course, people who are Jewish, and somewhat it also impacts their faith as well, in their direction and mutation as well in the world. So I've basically dug back in history to actually look at what has actually gone on by summarizing this person's findings with this title, all the way back to the late 1400s. So I basically typed it all out here. I don't want to elaborate too much because you can always take a screen snapshot using your phone or software and read this on your own later. And I've actually moved forward to 1948 to 1949. There's also a tetrad of blood moon eclipses, what this basically happened historically. And the third one, this has happened in 1967 and 1968 as well. What basically happened. In more recent times, I dug back to what actually happened in 2014 to 2015. So this was what happened way back when. And of course, this brings us to now, 2025 to 2026. I have mentioned earlier that eclipses, they just not only last in their effect, just for that few months and that's it. I've talked about solar eclipses so far, in which their effects can have a longer unfolding story for 3 years or more. How about lunar eclipses? If we actually count back the very first blood moon eclipse that happened recently in March 2025, it was a full moon on steroids. So when did that blood moon eclipse seeded in its intent? We gotta count back 18 months. If we actually come back from March of 2025, 18 months back, we actually end up with September 2023. We all know what happened on 7th of October 2023. So this is very much tied to the new moons that were seeded starting from September 2023, in which it is still unfolding, by the way. And I've told you earlier that the tetrad of blood moon eclipses will still be present in its effect until the first half of 2028. Because I still got to take into account the partial lunar eclipse at 4 to 5 degrees of Pisces that will happen in late August of 2026. That is the, should I say, the last tetrad or near tetrad of blood moon eclipses that will occur. I have also put down here as well, there's a lot of strong connections between Israel and China. This is what I have uncovered while doing this study as well. So when we have a tetrad or near tetrad of blood moon eclipses, it not only affects Israel and the Jewish people and their faith and all those stuff, but this also impacts China also. I have mentioned, I think more than a couple of times, what has been going on in terms of why is Israel and China always on the news, starting from 2023, particularly September onwards when that new moon was seeded that became a blood moon eclipse 18 months later in late March 2025. It is actually part of this phenomena that I want to share with with all of you. And hopefully, if you want to read, of course, you can take screen snapshots, or if you want to purchase these slides, it's actually up for sale for a small price. You can contact me by emailing me on my work email to purchase these slides, and this is for you to keep. I will send you a copy of this PDF, and you can just kind of periodically refer to this slides and kind of check where we are at in terms of the unfolding of 2026 story. So let me just jump straight into the first of two Transit Venus star point. This one will be in Capricorn. And I have actually posted in my broadcast group something pertaining to the royal family. This is a continuation of the story in which I have shared with you guys in late 2024 when I talked about 2025. I'm talking about the slides talking about the UK. This is from my slides last year, talking about the UK, what is actually going on. And also I've talked about Starmer and also King Charles as well. There is a continuation in the story when this Transit Venus star point in Capricorn will be seeded. I have basically put up prior predictions pertaining to King Charles potentially stepping down and transitioning over to the other side over the next couple of months. And this is under the influence of this evening star, ES. CP is Capricorn. VSP is Venus star point influence. Usually we feel more than one transit Venus star point in its influence when we talk about this way of looking at things, because it all goes back to that pentagram. Although the predominant energy in 2026 is that Capricorn transit Venus star point, but I need to look at this holistically to see what's coming. This includes the dominant transit Venus star point back in 2025, which is that 2 degree 39 minutes of Aries transit Venus star point that we are still experiencing right now. Whatever that's unfolding will carry forward in this kind of unfolding story. And we may actually see or have news of a state funeral around the time of this transit Venus star point in Capricorn that will be formed end of first week of January 2026. We've still got about 6 weeks to go before we finish off 2025. I do see that there is something going on pertaining to his health that is perhaps hidden from the public, that is more serious than we think. And this may actually be the lead up of a potential like state funeral for that matter. Why am I saying this? This is because this middle degree Capricorn transit Venus star point will be squaring King Charles' natal Venus. And this Capricorn transit Venus star point also has Mars landing on top of it as well. So it's like a stellium of Sun, Venus, and Mars all squaring his natal Venus. So there's something going on pertaining to what we don't know from the public. Also, there's another petition that I've put out in my broadcast groups, talking about the future King William maybe stripping the now Andrew, not Prince Andrew, from his title, in which, in terms of timeline, I've gotten it wrong. In recent times, it's King Charles that has stripped Prince Andrew to become Andrew, basically, and take away his royal benefits. What I do see remaining that I have put out there is that when Prince William become King William, he will proceed to strip um, the titles of the Duke and Duchess of Montecito, California. Yeah, there's something along that line. And yeah, we may actually be anticipating that kind of news coming out in 2026. Also, I can foresee that there will be um, more scandals pertaining to Prince Andrew, something salacious that may come out as well. I have kind of sprawl around the internet to look at what that may be. This can be leading up to some kind of expose pertaining to uh, the now Andrew, not Prince Andrew anymore, possessing some kind of STIs or STDs that's not curable. Particularly is that three-letter thing that I won't mention here on the channel for fear of this live not being able to monetize, which can subsequently develop into that four-letter word that came from that three-letter virus, put it that way. Amongst other stuff as well. Last but not least, I also did put out there that there may be like the swing towards the Reform Party in the UK that will become more popular, or should I say come into power in 2026 itself. And this is on the backs of Starmer just stepping away, which I do see late this year into the early part of next year, all the way up to, I think, Q2 of next year. There's something in the sky in particularly Q2 when that transit Mercury, Mars, and Saturn do that triple conjunction. But in January, when Sun, Venus, and Mars all conjunct in the middle degrees of Capricorn, that's when the cookies start to crumble. And then when the third week of April 2026 comes along or swings along with that transit Mercury, Mars, and Saturn all conjunct at 7 to 8 degrees of Aries, that's when we will see the change happen pertaining to perhaps reform gaining the upper hand in terms of popularity and votes, or the call to have a change in power, or to have an election of sorts, because Mercury does talk about casting votes. That's election linked. So this is the inception chart for that Capricorn transit Venus star point. And what I want to mention here is that I have placed more focused on the fixed stars in this inception chart. And I've also put in other points. I know this chart looks a bit like overcrowded and stuff, but if you see this thing called N with like the symbol of Mercury, this is the transit north node of Mercury. Yes, besides the moon, other planets have their equivalent of their north node and south node. I've plotted this in because this actually gives me like a richer tapestry of what's actually going on in the sky. Mercury is out of bound, by the way, over this evening star Capricorn transit Venus star point inception time frame. So there will be some news, which is Mercury, pertaining to Capricorn issues. This can be people who are higher up there, people in authority, or people who have some kind of power over others, which is Capricornian in nature. Capricorn can also be talking about projects that's put in place to create a gap in society as well. So we may actually hear some news pertaining to that just when the year starts in 2026. I also want to point out some other stuff pertaining to the north node of transit Chiron. Where's transit Chiron? Yeah, over here, I've highlighted in green. The north node of Chiron is squaring the north node of Mercury and also transit Pluto as well. This is telling me that there may be further push in terms of needing the general population to log in with personal info in order to access the internet every time we use it. Or there can be this idea that may be floated around pertaining to potentially paying to use the internet. In other words, the internet will not be free. This is what I'm alluding to. And the north node of Mars, which is over here, is conjunct Ceres in the sky. Over this transit Venus star point as well, I do see that there will be this push for us to be self-sufficient to grow our own food and produce for self-sustenance purposes. We also may need to be more aware of the fact that we need to have a proper diet to give us sustained energy to last through this whole year's potentially lack of stability in our timeline at this period of collective human history. 2026, I just don't see this as a year that you can feel any sense of stability or there's any opportunity for you to slow down. In other words, it's almost like where you need to go, you just need to go. Like things can be pretty like haphazard. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. And so we need the nutrients, and that's why the proper diet comes in to give us that sustained energy to carry on. There may be issues also with violence and fire within the agricultural sector. This can be like the larger agenda so that we can't be independent from the matrix or system by controlling our food. And last but not least, I've also highlighted transit Jupiter conjunct the north node of Pluto and the north node of Saturn over here. And we may feel this, how do I put it, ambition to accomplish big things, but we may find that we have difficulty getting the resources to do so. This is the perfect time when the transit Venus star point is in Capricorn to set your intent, get down to drafting your long-term plan so that you can subsequently act on it. I guess that's the best way to put it because the energy is supportive of that. There will be all this obsession pertaining to changing the current circumstances that's around us. I think because that Jupiter is still in Cancer, I've gotten like an unusual spike in readings pertaining to relocation astrology service in which I do provide to help people find out which grid line suits them better depending on what they want to manifest. I have also utilized that myself to spend my birthday or solar return elsewhere outside of Singapore. Um, this year, I have used that to decide where to spend my 1 in 12 years Jupiter return elsewhere in the world. So far, it's been interesting, put it that way. So make use of this energy in this inception chart to really sit down, dig deep, and what you want to achieve in the next coming few years. For sure, there's a whole bunch of shenanigans happening in the world, but you have to find your spiritual center. This may actually help with that. Maybe have a proper diet and proper set meal times as well, so that you can have the energy to sit down and devise that long-term plan to really go for it later this year. What you want to attain for yourself in terms of achievements, certain projects that you want to launch. But do note that always approach things with a plan being thought out. Maybe you even need a plan B, even a plan C as well. Make sure that you test your plan so that it gives you leeway in case you need to make changes. Because as I mentioned earlier, this year we don't have any fixed energies around. From mutable, it changed to cardinal. From Valentine's Day onwards, all the way into even part of next year. So think properly before you act. That's what I'm trying to say. We will also experience Pluto out of bound. Just to answer your question, we just had the first year, which is this year, 2025, in which Pluto will go out of bound. And it's still out of bound today as we speak. It will get out of that out of bound range, I think, December, middle of December. With each passing year starting in 2025, Transit Pluto will go out of bound for longer and longer and longer periods of time. Okay? As Transit Pluto enters deeper and deeper into the sign of Aquarius. So I've actually written here that look out for NATO developments in 2026. This is because under the influence of this Transit Venus star point in Capricorn, which is cardinal sign, if you look at the natal chart, in which I do have it here. Yeah, I do have it here. The innermost wheel is the natal chart. And you can see that they do have a whole bunch of placements in Aries in the 7th house. And we are still having unfolding solar eclipse energies. Over the axis of Aries Libra that's still unfolding as we speak. And not to forget that this year we've got transit Mercury, Mars and Saturn around 7 to 8 degrees of Aries, which is pretty much bang on natal's Mercury, Mars, Venus, and the Sun, all opposing Neptune. Something to be concerned about. So look out for NATO developments in 2026 over this Transit Venus star point in Capricorn energy. And I've basically written here, when was the last time we've got a Sun, Venus, Mars triple conjunction scenario? And what has happened? this is actually not so good for the markets. So what I'm trying to say is that in 2026, the market may experience like massive corrections, or should I say overall a downturn. I'm actually hinting at recessionary pressures. And this is on the back of what we experienced back in third week of September with that 29 Virgo solar eclipse that opposed Saturn. This is still unfolding, by the way, as we speak. And 29 Virgo point eclipses are usually connected to economic recessions. So with this added on top of that, I think we can somehow say that there's going to be like a massive market correction or recessionary pressures that we may anticipate in 2026. So now let's move on to further dig into that 19th to 20th April triple conjunction of Mars, Saturn, and Mercury, with Saturn ruling this Capricorn transit Venus star point, which will accompany us for the most of 2026. I do see something that will happen pertaining to Taiwan. I'm talking about a possible invasion by China. There's already a lot of changes this year pertaining to internal power struggles between the main guy that's there and also the leader of the PLA, or the Army Department of China. There's kind of like this power struggle and change in power dynamics. So this can't be ruled out. And why this can't be ruled out? Let us look at the astrocartography or ACG map, the moment of inception. When this sky map happens, and plot this against the world map, we do have all these energies that's falling over, well, for one thing, China, but the lines are also cutting across Taiwan as well, which is over here. This will be happening around April, the second half of April, because 19th to 20th is the second half. I will go on and say that the month of April will be particularly precarious in terms of a potential invasion. This may not be outright shooting missiles, but this can be like cornering as well, because we do have Saturn in the mix on top of Mercury and Mars. This can be cornering Taiwan in such a way that it may cut off their supplies to make them starve, basically. Something along that line. And if ever there's plans to execute this, the plans may have already been formulated back in November 2025, which is currently where we are at right now. Because right now in the sky, we do have transit Jupiter, trining Saturn, both in water signs. And 25 degrees of Cancer and Pisces. It is activating Taiwan's chart actively, particularly their Mercury, Venus, Eris, E-R-I-S, not Aries, Eris, as in the asteroid, which is Mars's sister. Mars as well, Pluto, and nodal axis. So there's already some talks happening this month in November 2025 pertaining to a possible April 2026 invasion of Taiwan from China. I've also included other things as well in terms of what you may anticipate for the bulk of 2026. Some of them are pertaining to the internet. Some are societal uprisings. Food inequality widens. And then like this part regarding the stock market, we could be anticipating like a massive correction, or the markets are under recessionary pressures. And the last one, this should not be a surprise, like the great layoff has started due to like transit Pluto being out of bound more and more and more, or for longer and longer and longer, while in a sign of Aquarius. But I do see this AI being a bubble, which will eventually burst in 2030 to 2033. This will be when transit Uranus will also go out of bounds. And Uranus rules over the sign of Aquarius, where transit Pluto is transiting. So 2030 to 2033, I do see this AI bubble bursting, in other words. In some other news, the Universal Basic Income Program may get rolled out more to kind of buffer or provide some kind of landing. And then Uranus and Gemini stuff, robots, drones, all those things. I have also written some other ones that I just want to throw out. To the audience. AI schmut or corn may actually take over the internet. There may also be like a historical cryptocurrency hack, which may happen as well. We may actually have a disproportionately major earthquakes that's happening all around the world. This mainly comes from the minor grand trine. And when transit Pluto goes out of bound, even more so, this will happen from August to November. No, August to December, sorry. Yeah, that's when transit Pluto will go out of bound next year. There can be large data center conspiracy. There's something that will be unfolded there. World markets and businesses falter or undergo massive problems. Open source AI breaking or ignoring regulations or rules, leading to hacking and cyber hacking in record numbers. Something of that nature. There may also be giant multiple tax hikes in collapsing countries as well. This is something that I've thought about it later. And extra funds may actually go towards weapons instead of education for nation building. I'm talking about the main players in this case, like China and USA, and the prominent players in NATO as well. So, what about this part? This is mostly pertaining to the UK. You can watch my previous forecast video on Astrology to catch up on what I said regarding 2025 and fact check me and tell me what I have predicted correctly and otherwise. But on top of what's going on in the UK, I also want to talk about what is going on in JD Vance's life, because people have sent me questions pertaining to what's actually going on in JD Vance's life at that event with Erica Kirk. So this one is more of like natal analysis, but also I've used Erica Kirk's chart, which doesn't have a birth time. This makes it difficult. But JD Vance's, it has a timed birth data. I have looked into their comparative astrology and also looked at JD Vance's and JD Vance's wife Usha Vance's chart. And this is what I have in short. I do see JD Vance potentially divorce or become single again in 2026 under the influence of this transit Venus star point in Capricorn. But to kind of widen the timeline, I do see the beginning of 2027 is still possible. So the $1 million question is, will he get together with Erica Kirk? I don't see it because I see their relationship as more of like a one-sided attraction, which may not even be that strong as well. At least romantically, because there is this kind of awareness on both sides on who they are, what they like, what they don't like, and they don't like each other that way. Even if one party displays slightly more interest, it's just like a one-sided thing. Basically, I've utilized their composite chart and do progressions on it. And I'll leave it there. There is a square between Sun and Venus that's conjunct in Scorpio in their progressed composite chart to Mars in Aquarius. So this already tells me that it's probably like a one-sided thing. So this is really talking about the archetypal energies of the next transit Venus star point in Scorpio. This will be happening at 0 degrees 45 minutes of that sign. So I've actually written down the Sabian symbol, what this is about, on a very broad, high-level basis, what this may mean for the collective. And what we can look forward to. So you may want to take a screen snapshot of this if you like to just have like a broad base knowledge of this transit Venus star point and what it may entail. If you're into the more like nitty gritty of things, then this will be for you. So I've actually approached this just like the previous transit Venus star point in Capricorn. The difference is that the previous one is an evening star. When Venus meets up with the Sun, Venus is direct or at her furthest distance away from Earth. This Scorpio one is a morning star or MS. This is when Venus kisses the Sun when she's retrograding or at her closest distance to Earth. Okay? So I've basically highlighted certain bubbles. And let me just quickly go through what this may mean. The transit Venus star point at 0 degrees 45 minutes of Scorpio, it does square Juno and Pluto in the beginning of Aquarius. The north node of Saturn and opposes the south node of Chiron. Yeah. So this is what we call like a grand square in energy. When I actually see this grand square, what this basically tells me is that it really highlights or talks about the frustrated, estranged, mostly male um, population within the sphere of love and relationships. With the portrayal of personal relationships on media as purely transactional in nature, I'm talking about the phenomena of incels, INCEL, those who are involuntarily celibate. So this basically describes the trend of that. Um, that's pretty prevalent in increasing numbers. When we talk about mid millennials, those born in the 90s onwards, into Gen Z, those with natal Pluto in Scorpio and later parts of Scorpio and also Sagittarius, those who have natal Neptune in Capricorn and Aquarius, and those who have natal Uranus in Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces generation. There's also another aspect pattern over here on top of a grand square. That is what we call a kite aspect pattern. Those are highlighted in green. You can see there's like a grand trine and there's an opposition. This is what we call a kite aspect pattern. This basically represents that over this transit Venus star point in Scorpio, the very last one, that this really is the turning point in terms of birthing a multipolar world power. But having said this, this also represents the world we are living in right now, because we are undergoing like a late stage capitalistic world structure that's conflict filled. When this transit Venus star point in Cancer phases in, because Scorpio is such a death and rebirth sign and it talks about metamorphosis, so things can feel like a tower moment, like the tower card in tarot. It may feel like a collapse altogether in order to build a brand new future for all of us. Because of the aspects to that Juno and Pluto, we can actually see more infringement on basic human rights in order to get the global infrastructure up, such as digital ID, UBI, social credit system, and programmable central bank digital currency, CBDC, with expiry date function incorporated into them, carbon taxes as well, conditional access to the internet, and other data harvesting techniques. We may actually see them going harder once this transit Venus star point in Scorpio start phasing in Q4 of 2026. But on the flip side, this also pushes the collective to awaken on an accelerating rate. And this can be talking about the turning point in which humanity needs to realize both sides are being radicalized against each other by the same enemy before it's too late. In other words, we are all being manipulated. Also, 0 degree of Scorpio is squaring that 0 degree of Aquarius. This was when transit Jupiter and Saturn conjunct back in 21st of December 2020 at 0 degrees of Aquarius. So this transit Venus star point is very tightly squaring um, that point, the energetic point that's still unfolding. Tracing the flow of the unfoldment in the story, I do see certain key players leave the World Trade Organization. In this case, I am suggesting that China may do so because they do have their natal moon and ascendant in early degrees of Aquarius. This is where transit Pluto, sometimes out of bounds, sometimes not, that will be conjuncting their natal moon and ascendant. This may actually accelerate the deglobalization of the supply chain massively on the back of global tensions and conflicts that's arising as we speak. So this is what I have put in terms of what we may anticipate in 2026 under the influence of this transit Venus star point in Scorpio happening on the first day of Scorpio, which is the third week of October. But having said that, transit Venus would have gone into Scorpio much earlier, before the sun does, because Venus will go retrograde and kiss the sun eventually. So Venus is moving ahead of the sun. We may actually feel this even before the third week of October of 2026. So I've actually gone on to look at the USA's chart because, no surprise here, the USA is going through a lot. And by the way, they do have a natal Venus star point in the very early degrees of Scorpio. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that the USA will be going through their natal Venus star point return next year. So, with that said, let's look at what's going on in the USA. I just want to mention here that when we have a Venus star point return, this usually ties in with a Pluto return cycle of around 250 years. This can be further broken down into 5 separate Chiron returns. Each Chiron return lasts for about 50 to 51 years. So if you multiply that by 5, which is the number of sides of a pentagram, you get a Pluto return, which is also a transit Venus star point return. We can look at their Chiron returns because their Chiron is in Aries for the USA, which is also a Mars root sign that also rules over their natal Venus star point in early Scorpio. So I have employed this method and dug up what actually happened in the 5 previous Chiron returns that USA has experienced to find out what's actually going on. And something interesting basically came up. I will leave you to read what's been going on till just before this point and just dive straight into the current Chiron return. For this, I have widened the orb because when we talk about a country's chart in terms of the unfolding story, it's not just like strictly, oh, okay, 1 degree orb, that's it. I widened the orb a little bit more to accommodate like multiple passes and to have a more holistic look into what's been going on. What is really interesting is that there is this kind of activism of women's and civil rights in the US. And somehow they achieve some kind of new breakthrough at every passage when Chiron passes through the sign of Aries for them. What's coming up in the next solar return in 2026 for the USA will be particularly concerning. And that's because there will be a Mars and Uranus conjunction in early degrees of Gemini on Independence Day for the USA next year. This is a prelude to the Uranus return for the USA. Because in the USA chart, they do have an angular Uranus in the 7th house. And through previous research, there's always a lot of things happening. In the USA, when Uranus transits the sign of Gemini. I have actually included here that, or should I say, hinting at the rise of fascism. I think we can basically see it like ever since the current president was elected, that there's like this trend that is in prominence as we speak. The whole thing regarding like regressing back into fascism and the implications that it may hold. I have looked into the 3Ks. This is pretty, on one hand, concerning, but as you know, history usually rhymes but does not repeat. But at the rate of the current, should I say, political climate, I do see that the 3Ks is coming back into their popularity and power. And I think that's why I have seen that people who are non-white or people who are LGBTIAQ+, they are leaving the USA in droves, for that matter. And I've written here that Uranus in Gemini does symbolize insulative ideological groups. And this may represent the 3Ks, but also other fringe groups as well, who have more radical, non-inclusive beliefs. I want to switch gear now to talk about South Africa, because I don't think I have covered South Africa in my forecast before, because there's something that is, should I say, interesting going on with South Africa because of what's going on there. They are not going through the best of times, but I do see that for South Africa in particular, at least in the short term, there will be gradual deterioration into sporadic political and social unrest with violence, crime, and resource looting, even fires and environmental issues that may arise for South Africa. That will be emphasized by this Transit VenusStarPoint in Scorpio energy. However, I do want to point out that I don't see them descending into civil war in South Africa. I actually do see a success story coming later on after the shenanigans has played out for them. Because they do have one thing which is pretty unique to them that most of Europe don't have to grapple with, and that is Sharia law. But having said that, putting in my 2 cents in terms of analysis, they will go through quite a lot of decline in law and order in the short term over the next couple of years. When I say next couple of years, this can be until the beginning of next decade. Where I do see the true recovery for South Africa will be when this last transit Venus star point in Scorpio fully phase out to make way for the transit Venus star point in Libra. This will happen in Q4 of 2030. Where this will happen, I do see a recovery going on for South Africa. And who will actually be critical or important in terms of building South Africa up on its way to recovery? That's Elon Musk. Honestly, guys, I do see that he's actually going through some kind of spiritual awakening of sorts. And because he has South African roots, he may actually make moves with his businesses to possibly form some kind of like consortium of businesses that will help his home country. It's almost like he's going back to his roots and not forgetting where he came from. There's this kind of humbling inner inner knowing that he's trying to do good in the world pertaining to his roots in South Africa, in which I do see that he will come back to somehow reboot the economy of South Africa. And in the longer run, when the transit Venus star point is officially in Libra from 2030 onwards, this will be when I do see some kind of flourishing in that part of the world. 2030 and beyond. So this is what I have for you. 22 slides later. I guess I've talked enough. 2 hours later. So do you have any questions for me? I know that I've kind of gone on and on and on. The playback will be available. Any questions before I go? Because I probably need a very good rest or sleep after this. Yeah. No one? For Brazil, I can't comment because I don't have the necessary bunch of charts to sink my teeth into. Yeah. Artistic World 4058. I'm talking about that 3-letter virus that will lead into that 4-letter incurable illness that will need lifetime medication. Okay, I don't see any Okay, I think that's all for now. Thank you for being here. If you want to send a super, sure, I'm game for that. This will be on playback if you want to review this later. And yeah, North and South Korea relationship, I don't see it being good in 2026 because of the eclipses, what the transit Venus star point and its rulers are doing in the sky, um, what the outer planets are doing via transit. But guys, do look to the full moons over Aries and Libra season. For the Aries season, it will be the Libra full moon. During Libra season will be Aries full moon. Those two, I find that there will be some pivotal happenings that will be going on the world stage. Yeah. All right. So hopefully you guys have write down in the comments for me. Should this be a annual occurrence? All right. So till then, take care.